Solve the equations by completing the square. Now, for some of you, you've seen this add b, take half of b, square, and all this stuff. And there are some instructors that make it quite confusing. But let me show you how I've broken it down, okay? So let's look at the first one. I want to get this part by itself. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides. That gives me w squared plus 2w. Now I leave a big space here, equals 15. What I like to do next is actually write my squared part out. Now I take half of this number. That means I take 2 divided by 2, which is 1. And that goes here. Now this is really 1 squared. So I'm going to take 1 squared, which equals 1. And I'm going to put that here, plus 1. But if I add 1 to this side of the equation, I have to add 1 to the other side of the equation. I need to keep it balanced. So 15 plus 1 equals 16. And now I think we've probably done the hardest part of the equation. But we're going to keep going. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to have w plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4. So I'm going to have w plus 1 equals plus or minus 4. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides because I want to get w by itself. So w equals negative 1 plus or minus 4. Well, that gives me two answers. W equals negative 1 plus 4, and W equals negative 1 minus 4. So negative 1 plus 4 is 3. Negative 1 minus 4 is negative 5. And so these are my two solutions for that equation. Let's do the next one. Once again, I want this part by itself. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides of the equation. Okay? So I'm going to have z squared minus 5z, leave a space, equals, now negative 13 plus 9 is negative 4. What I'm going to do next is I like to write my squared part out. Okay. Now I take half of this number. So I think I'm going to write it right here. Negative 5 divided by 2. And that's just negative 5 halves. Now don't let this trip you up just because it's a fraction. Okay. So now I need to take negative 5 halves squared. So I'm going to square it. And when I square that, I'm going to get positive 25 fourths. And so that's what goes up here, plus 25 fourths. Now if I do it to one side of the equation, remember, I have to do it to the other side of the equation. Now some of you are getting really upset because we're having fractions, but don't, because we know how to add and subtract fractions. So I'm going to put this right down here and show you. I need a common denominator, which is going to be 4. So I'm actually going to have negative 16 fourths plus 25 fourths. Because if you look up here, this is over 1, and I just multiplied the top by 4 and the bottom by 4. So negative 16 plus 25 is 9 fourths. So what I'm going to have over here equals 9 fourths. Okay. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to have z minus 5 halves equals plus or minus. Now I can break these up into the square root of 9 over the square root of 4. Well, the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 4 is 2. So I'm going to have z minus 5 halves equals plus or minus 3 halves. Okay. I'm going to add 5 halves to both sides. Oh, I'm running out a little bit of room here. So I'm going to have z equals 5 halves plus or minus 3 halves. Okay. Now I'm going to add them and then subtract them. So 5 halves plus 3 halves is 8 halves, which is 4. That's one of my answers. And 5 halves minus 3 halves, I'm going to write that right here. So z equals 5 minus 3 is 2, 2 over 2, which is 1. And that's my other answer.